decidedly Arthurian bent to this morning's proceedings. Happy Monday. For those of you who want to go straight to me doing a kind of deep dive into this new bit of kit, I've put a time code here for you. Jump straight to that. But for those of you who are sticking around, a bit of context. Modular Mondays is basically documenting Sandy and my adventures with synthesis, modular, analog, digital, and all the periphery that goes alongside. Today not being an exception to that. Whilst Sandy's end goal is not yet clear to me, although I keep on saying he should do a bloody album, and if you've heard Sandy's modular jams, it would be bloody. My end goal is certainly to make an album, and what I'm doing with Modular Mondays is trying to find a different workflow so that I can create something unique to my canon that doesn't just sound like me churning out some offcuts from my scores for Poirot. I'm about 3 or 4 bits of kit off, feeling fully prepared for the album from a technological point of view, and I'm starting to draw up a kind of a roadmap of what the album will be, numbers of tracks, lengths of tracks, that kind of stuff. Coming up with a budget, I believe there'll be a couple of sessions later in the year which I'll invite you into. Where I'm at, solidified in my mind, is it's going to be an album of 3 of my loves, which is sampling, synthesizers, and systems music. And if I guess there was a creative theme to my album, it would be my greatest exploit outside of my life with my family and my life in music, my life with Spitfire, and that is this, walking. So basically, I'm making some exercise music. Anyway, next part of the technological jigsaw is a hardware sequencer, and I'm absolutely delighted to present today the Polyend Seq. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's a 32-step sequencer, but oh, so much more. Basically, it's 8 tracks, which you could perceive to be also 8 voices, so you can do stuff polyphonically. The way you connect it to your synths is via the back end, so you have a foot switch. Haven't investigated what that does yet. I wonder if that starts and stops sequences. We've got your MIDI out 1, MIDI out 2, MIDI through, MIDI in, and your USB, which is how I'm connecting to my modular today. If you want this for modular use, I humbly recommend the Polyend Poly, which I have connected to 2 different channels. I've got it in channel mode today. Apologies to Polyend saying that I'd had a DOA a few weeks ago. It turns out to have been a power consumption issue. So this is MIDI or USB channel 1, this is USB channel 2. And I'm simply connecting them to Plats and to Pluck. And this does strike me as a very seamless way of integrating the Polyend Seq into a modular system, a poly MIDI to CV converter. So in channel mode, these represent the different channels, and then you've simply got it splitting it off into the different CVs for gate, pitch, velocity, and modulation. So we're running at an internal clock, tempo 120, swing 50% seems to be just this straight quantize. And I'll talk about patterns in a moment. So let's just enter some stuff randomly into track 1. You can alternatively enter those events. Let's look at the track quality. So if we hold track 1 down, you can see that the default root note is C1. So if I change that, that's a way of also transposing the entire track. So these are the MIDI outs to, and this is the USB going out of channel 1. So these knobs both push and select. So this scrolls you through the different things to edit. We've got other universal track settings like the velocity. You can randomize velocity, select what also CCs you're triggering for each event, and a random modulation, I believe. These also apply to each individual note or selection of notes, I believe. So if we go note, yes, so you can select one or multiple notes and adjust stuff like the velocity, whether there's a modulation event on that. So that should, I imagine, go up to 127. Yeah. You can also adjust the note length, again, by clicking on them. You see it's a kind of a half strength light there depicting the note length. Another interesting feature is the roll feature, so you can actually do a multiple trigger just for one event. So if we go to roll, that's going to be a really fast one. Let's make that slightly slower. So let's adjust some of the pitches here. Let's try another track. So we've got channel 1, we want that to be channel 2. And this duplicate function is incredibly powerful. So if you go duplicate, select your source and select your destination, you can see that I've duplicated that. And that also does is duplicate the channel settings. So let's just adjust that. So we can move these along like that. There's some interesting ways to enter in multiple notes. I think what's also interesting is you can adjust the length of the sequence. So I'm just going to take this, see this here, I'm just going to make it so it's 1/16 less. This is very much in line with what I'm hoping to do with the album. Okay, so let's make that the same length, but also we can change the direction of travel to backward. So. And then we can also do a thing called ping pong. There's also random. As we can see, it's a 32-step sequencer, but it's incredibly powerful because within this, there's 256 patterns. We're currently working on pattern 1-1. So if I just go to duplicate, so pattern 1-1 is copied, I'm going to copy it into pattern 1-2. And then what you'll be able to see is I can switch between pattern 1 and pattern 2, which is obviously the same. So let's make some changes to this one. So let's maybe just take it up a minor third, my favorite way of, and let's move you along to that. So then let's have another look. So pattern 1, pattern 2. What's really clever about this is we can also enter an event that changes the pattern. So let's go to pattern, back to pattern 1, and on this channel, which is not connected to anything, I'm going to hit that and then go to note, and this is going to link to the next pattern along. So here we go, let's play pattern 1-1.
So, is this the best hardware sequencer ever? Well, it doesn't have the feature set of, say, some of the Electron stuff that I know Sandy loves using, but what puts me off the Electron stuff is the amount of screens you have to dive through. Likewise, I've also tried the Arturia BeatStep Pro, which has much better connectivity to CVs than the Polyend Seq. However, with the Polyend Poly CV converter, it is really a seamless integration into your modular system. The software step sequencer, the matrix, is very much based on drum machine kind of approaches to producing drum patterns. And it's as if Polyend has taken the evolution of the drum sequencer into a software sequencer and has brought it back out of the box. And going back to that whole thing of not having to dive into screens, for me, this is an intuitive piece of kit because I've been using step sequencers for 20, 25 odd years. So this, for me, yes, is the best hardware sequencer because I will be able to pick it up and put it away and pick it up again months later and still get value from it.
Baby steps for me, my first sequence using the Polyend Seq. Set up a nice patch here, but I've been kind of concentrating not really on the sounds, more on how best to approach the Seq, and I've learned a lot of lessons just with this one attempt. So basically I've got 32 patterns starting here, ending here,
And the way I keep track of stuff is I've got a little marker that's not actually outputting anywhere. So if I'm there, I know I'm in that pattern and that pattern. And it's good visual aid, but I'm also finding just actually using the sequence as a visual aid to know where the 1 is absolutely brilliant. That the lights are very tight on what's actually being triggered. So I have an intro part that basically oscillates between pattern 1-1 and 1-2. I've got a link here that takes me to pattern 1-2. And then a link here that takes me back to pattern 1-1. And then this time, when I loop round, I'm going to mute that, and there's another link that will take me to pattern 1-3. So it features the plats and the pluck. Let's start with the plats, basically going into this mini mixer here and then into magneto. I've got some oscillators or ramps, whatever you want to call them, looping ramps, that are both going to the harmonics of the plats and also a voltage control filter. So that's the plats. Same applies the plucks, which again, I've got a filter opening and closing, and I'm affecting the damper as well. Apply the magneto. Bit of stereo. And if we go on to the next. So basically now what I've got is a riff that is in unison for both the plats and the pluck. As we advance to this step here, things will start going out of phase to make things more interesting. You see where we get here, we're actually going to modulate up a third. So on both of those voices, I'm using both the gate and the pitch to trigger both the plats and the pluck. So completely controlled by the Polyend Seq. On this next one, what I'm doing, this part here, I'm feeding that into the make noise tempi, and you can see that I'm kind of subdividing different triggers out of that. So in the first instance, I've got a bass running. As always with the tempi, it just continues running whether the sequence is running or not. C sharp, D sharp, and then C. Again, going into this little mini mixer here, I've got something subdivided in tempo into the MCO, which again is going into the magneto as well. I've got the chimera being controlled by this beast here, and the reason why I'm not subdividing that is you'll hear that I'm applying a roll here. So the chimera is the hi-hat machine here. Just have a look at that. Roll, it's just a little double note there. And you'll see also that I'm using different velocities. So you can see there's a velocity patch there into, oh, it's just a pitch thing, just to give it a bit of shape. Also going into 6, I've got the trigger controlling the Bafako ADSR. I'm triggering some notes in the MCO here, which is going into the clouds, but actually what the kind of the triggers are actually doing is opening and closing a gate to the clouds, not the oscillator that's going into the clouds. So it gives a kind of nice glitchy feel. Let's go back to the first pattern to hear this, and you'll see that there. Nice kind of glitchy feel. Last but not least, we've got defam, triggered by a subdivided click from, or clock from the tempi. I'm also having some fun with it going into a black hole. And that's basically it. I'm accompanying with my Novation Summit, which is linked up here, a film about that. So playing that live, and only just a couple of bits interactions for me to do live with this.
So, disclaimer,
This is a noodle. This is me experimenting with the Polyend Seq, not coming up with an album track, and the jam you're about to witness by no means reflect the sonic characteristics of what I'm hoping my album to be. It's just basically a noodle. So if you stick around to have a listen to it, thanks ever so much. But if you're buggering off now, please do subscribe for future episodes and ding that bell if you want to be notified the next time I do actually put up an episode. One of those would be fantastic for all of those very clever people at Polyend. I love your kit, it's amazing. Thanks for watching as always, here's the jam.